Hi, I'm Father Phil. This is another in the series, What Do We Believe About the Sacraments? And this particular reflection and the one that will follow it are both on the sacrament of anointing of the sick. And they follow the two that were on the sacrament of reconciliation. And those two together make up what we know as the healing sacraments. So I want to begin with just a brief quote from the ritual, the rite for pastoral care of the sick. And these introductory pastoral notes are wonderful introduction to what the sacrament means, how we celebrate it, why we celebrate it, when we celebrate it. So here's what the opening sentence says. Suffering and illness have always been among the greatest problems that trouble the human spirit. So, in the midst of suffering and illness, what do we do? What does it mean to suffer? How does our faith help us? What does it tell us? Is healing possible? Is healing our illness and curing our sickness the same thing? All good questions. Now, my intent is not to answer all of them, and I'm not even sure I can answer well any of them. But maybe these thoughts will help to explore what we believe about this sacrament, anointing of the sick. Perhaps the fundamental belief that Christians have shared since the earliest days of our tradition, going right back actually into biblical times, during the writings of the gospel and especially during the writings of the letters of Paul and the Acts of the Apostles. One of the fundamental beliefs of Christians is that we are so closely tied to the person of Jesus Christ that we can say he calls us to walk with him through his life, through his passion, into his death, and into the glory of his resurrection. Our relationship, our friendship is so integral, so connected with that of Jesus Christ, that we share in all of that in sometimes a mysterious way, and sometimes it's so real. We feel it, we embrace it. There are 51 accounts of healing encounters in Jesus' life recorded in the four Gospels. Now, some of those accounts are repeated. So some of the ones that are in Matthew are also in Mark. Some of the ones in Mark are also in Luke. Now, some of them, of course, are very close to each other, but they all have maybe a little nuance, as it were, that catches our attention and draws us into these remarkable works of Jesus' earthly ministry. And each of them, every one of them, is a sign of the mercy and the undying compassion of God. So, it should not surprise us that the early communities of faith, beginnings of the church, found ways to reach out to those in their community, in their midst, who were sick. They prayed for them, they cared for them, and in all of that, reminded the sick and themselves that the mercy of God would bring healing and peace. We go to the first letter of James for the foundation of our sacrament of anointing of the sick. And in that letter, you may be familiar with the quote. The author of the letter may have been James, says, if there's anyone sick among you, call for the presbyters, call for the priests, call for the elders, call them in, and the community will pray for the sick and will lay hands upon them, anointing them. So in that short passage in the letter of James, we have three elements of the ritual that are still key parts of the sacrament: the human experience of sickness, the prayer of the community, and the desire of God to raise us up. Actually, there's a fourth element, and that is the trust of the sick person in the mercy of God. Like all the sacraments, they rest on the faith of the person and a faith in the power of God to change our lives. And not just the power of God, but as we see in every one of Jesus' healing encounters, the desire of God that we should be restored to health, returned to our place in the community, and renewed in our spirit to continue